Good evening, everyone. My name is Geneva. I am a marketing coordinator with Ideal Credit Union. And today I want to thank you for joining us for our cybersecurity awareness webinar. Today we're focusing on a topic that impacts all of us, protecting ourselves and our loved ones from financial fraud. And we're honored to have Tara Ambrose, Senior Financial Fraud Ombudsperson from the Minnesota Department of Commerce, as our guest presenter. Tara brings extensive expertise in fraud prevention and enforcement and will share practical tips and insights to help you stay safe in an increasingly digital world. Before we dive in, a quick reminder, this is an interactive session, so feel free to submit your questions in the chat at any time, and we'll address them during the Q&A at the end of Tara's presentation. So let's get started and learn how to stay informed, empowered, and secure. Tara?
Thank you very much, Neva, and thank you very much for letting me be part of this event and speaking to your valued customers. So as Geneva said, my name is Tara Ambrose, and I'm the Senior Financial Fraud Ombudsperson at the Minnesota Department of Commerce. And when you think of commerce, we'll talk a little bit about what my team does later in the presentation, but when you think of commerce, we're basically a regulator, and we help be advocates for consumers and resolve disputes between consumers and businesses that are regulated in Minnesota. My role is a little bit different, and I focus primarily on fraud that targets seniors and vulnerable Minnesotans. However, fraud certainly targets everyone. You do not have to be a certain age. There is no sort of caveat that you have to be impaired. People of all ages and all backgrounds are targeted by fraud and cybercrime in particular. So my presentation today is going to focus on the focus of it, on the cyber component of fraud. And when you think of cybersecurity, I want you to think of it as a very broad umbrella term. And I want you to always think of your personal cybersecurity or things you can do to protect yourself online and to protect your data and your devices. So we'll go over some practical tips. I'm going to talk about trends, kind of how these scams work and how people are able to get your data. And then we'll have I'll go over a couple of stories and talk about that and what my team does to help in scenarios, especially with seniors. And then at the end, again, if you have questions, we'll try to address those as well. So let's just talk briefly about how big of a problem online fraud and scams are. Now, this is data from the Federal Trade Commission. They put out a report every year about scams, and the vast majority of these have, or all of them have, an internet component. It's not just, oh, can you guys hear me okay? Someone's saying they can't hear. Geneva, can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can hear you. It looks like Rosetta, she's unable to hear you. I'll answer.
Okay, sorry, I just want to make sure I wasn't on mute or something. Okay, great. So this just wanted to show what these top categories are. And even when you get a call on the phone and somebody is running a scam of some kind, often there is a internet component on the back end, whether that is the actual phone call is happening over an internet line, whether it is directing you to a fake website or an app. Those types of components all have those types of scams all have an internet component of some kind. So let's just talk about the categories in these top frauds that they saw in 2024. And this is true for Minnesota as well. Imposters is a very big category. And this is everything from somebody impersonating a real business, Microsoft, Apple, somebody impersonating Amazon. It could be somebody pretending to be your bank, right? You've probably seen some of those. I would, if I was in the room with you, I'd ask you to raise your hand if any of you have gotten the text messages that claim to be from Minnesota DMV, or I think there was one that was from the Minnesota Revenue Division. And so they can impersonate real businesses, real government agencies, but it even goes down to personal things too. It can be romance scams fall in that category. It's kind of the grandparent scam, what we call, which is when they call and they say, Grandma, hurry up, I'm in trouble, I got arrested, I hit a pregnant woman in my car, here, talk to my lawyer. And then the lawyer goes on and why they need to wire some money right away to keep the person out of jail. So the imposter is kind of that largest category. And then there's online shopping and reviews. So whenever something seems too good to be true, especially online, or hey, you can get this deal here, but if you go to this other website and get it faster, this can even be things like pumping up a product or tearing down a product to kind of give an advantage to a competitor. Then there's a whole category of business and job opportunities. In my world, dealing primarily with seniors, I don't see those as much, but they're hitting the younger generations really hard with those. And then number 4 is the investment scams. And we're seeing this at all age groups. But the fastest growing scams in this category involve cryptocurrency, which I will talk about in a little bit. And then there's some internet services scams, which are kind of again focused on how people connect to the internet, how they talk to each other. But all of these have some sort of internet component. And when they start on social media, the losses go up. The longer the scam goes on, the higher amount of money people lose. And there was a record 12.5 billion in losses reported last year. And every year it keeps going up and up and up. The median fraud loss for all types of complaints that the Federal Trade Commission got was $700. However, I want you to compare that with this data here. I'm just going to talk about the median fraud loss goes up when the older you are. So all age groups are targeted. And when you add them all together, about 60% of the losses happen with just people that are 60 and above. And so all the other age groups combined have a lot lower threshold. And it kind of makes sense. Like, right, if you're a scammer and you're targeting a 21-year-old, you're not going to ask for $100,000. You're going to ask for 2,000, right? But they're going to know if they reach a 60-year-old or somebody who's retired, they might have more money saved. They might have more access to investment type money rather than just what's in their checking account. So this is FBI data from last year. The FBI reported actually $16 billion in losses. And this is just, again, what's getting reported. And the highest amounts of those are seniors as well. So let's just briefly talk about Minnesota and some data that I thought was interesting as I looked at our specific data. Age 60 plus overall losses last year were right in the middle as ranking of all the states, but we lost about $52 million just seniors reporting losses to the FBI last year. But let's look at cryptocurrency specific scams. So these are ones that have that cryptocurrency nexus, whether it's an investment scam or cryptocurrency, like you go to the ATM and you put in cryptocurrency in to pay a debt of some kind or to get money to someone that you care about, but it turns out to be a scam. Those were $91 million in losses reported last year. And that's growing significantly, especially the cryptocurrency part as well. And I want you to think for a minute before we talk about the tactics. And I used to have a slide in here and I forgot to put it back in. If anyone just thinks for a minute, how much do you think the actual losses are? When you think of these types of scams combined, not necessarily like cybersecurity attacks of businesses, but individual consumers losing money in scams, whether it's extortion because they took over your computer, whether it's they trick you. The FBI says 16 billion was reported last year in losses. FTC said 13 billion about, and that's just a fraction of what they estimate are the actual losses. So there is a study that went out last year, and it was from the FTC in coordination with AARP, I think it was AARP and some other researchers that not guessed, but they did research based on not only just the bank filings, kind of the amount of suspicious activity reports that are filed. They did research based on police reports and how often people are filing complaints with businesses and things like that that have been impersonated. And they did surveys and other types of research as well. They actually estimated that about $150 billion is what's actually lost every year in scams and fraud. And so it's just a tiny fraction of what's getting reported. And part of that is because of the tactics that scammers and abusers use. And they almost, I want you to think of them as psychological manipulation or psychological abuse almost. So once you get that click, once you click on that link, once you start engaging with them, they know how to pretend to be somebody you trust. They know how to create a sense of urgency, whether that's positive or negative. They can do it via fear and intimidation. They can do it in excitement and attention. They often ask to pay in very specific ways. They'll demand payment through a specific method or app, or they'll say gift cards or cryptocurrency, or they'll want you to wire through an intermediary. They also ask you to lie. They'll coach you with what to say. Both credit unions and banks and myself, we know when consumers are talking to us and we suspect they're in the middle of a scam, we know that the scammers that are talking to them are telling them not to trust us and telling them what to say. Say it's for home repairs, say it's for something else. And so there's no judgment from us, but we know that those scammers know how to create that sort of guilt and frustration. So when I've talked to victims and I've asked them, well, did you ask this person for documentation about this? They say you won the lottery, but what type of evidence have you seen? And most of the time, the consumers have said, yeah, I asked for all of that. But then the scammer knows how to make them feel really bad about even asking for it. It kind of shames them for how could you not trust me? Like, this is how it goes. What are, how are you dumb? And they kind of shame them into that submission to say, I'm going to give up and just go along with it kind of thing. And that can happen to people of all ages and all backgrounds. It's not specific to just seniors. So let's talk briefly about how they start. They can often start with a pop-up on your device, an urgent call or text. They also can be some sort of demand for payment. And sometimes they just make friends. So when I've asked a lot of people how it all started, it's like, well, I met somebody on Words with Friends. I met somebody on Facebook. It was a friend of a friend of a friend on Facebook. We talked about impersonation scams. And so it could be something where they say, well, your bank, there's this fraudulent transaction on Amazon or this transaction at your bank, and we want to talk to you about it, but it's really not your bank. Other types of scams that kind of cause there should be red flags as well, or any talk about money, about your investments, how they can make you money, how they can get an inheritance or that they have an inheritance coming. Those types of things. And the reason these works is that they know how to create that again, that heightened sense of emotional state. And then they use technology to their advantage and they can manipulate it. So I want to just briefly tell a story. I'll pause right here and tell a story. I had a particular situation where we'll call him Bob. Bob was in his early 60s, wasn't even quite retired yet, but had a very successful savings planning for retirement. And he had been talking for a long time about how he didn't want all of his money in the stock market. He wanted some of the money to be in some other type of what he said secure investment. And so he'd been talking about this for a while. He then talked to his financial people and his professionals and said, I want to actually buy some gold. And the financial professional was not necessarily opposed to that, but as they asked more questions, it turns out he wanted to buy gold bars. And just from my personal experience, whenever I used to hear about gold bars, they were often just fictitious gold bars that, the scammer was talking about. They were trying to get gold bars out of some country and they were asking you to help them. But I've seen more and more where they're trying to get the consumer, they're trying to get you to actually go to a dealer or Costco and buy these little gold bars that are actually solid gold. So when they ask more questions and they talk to the consumer about his plan and his goals, and they said, okay, I'm going to take out just the small amount of my overall portfolio to have these gold bars. I'm going to put them in a safe in my house. That's all I want to do with them. That's just my plan. It just would make me feel better. And there wasn't necessarily a sense of urgency. The financial advisor kind of did some due diligence and said, hey, have you talked to the tax advisor about this? Have you talked to your family about this? And they sort of did the due diligence there and eventually got comfortable with it. They even researched where that person was planning to buy the gold bars from. And it was some dealer in St. Paul. So, supposedly they take out the money, they buy the gold bars, everything's fine. But about 4 months later, that consumer, Bob, comes back and says, his financial advisor, I need another big chunk for more gold. And that set off a ton of red flags. So long story short, the gold was not in Bob's house. Bob did not keep it in a safe. He was wrapped up in a scam that started with a friendship on Facebook. And he wound up passing those gold bars off to somebody in a Perkins parking lot and lost all that money. And when I asked him how all it started all that long time ago, it was all this, just an innocent conversation with somebody on Facebook that he didn't know. It then developed into a friendship, and he had been talking to that person for over a year. And they know how to latch on to your same political beliefs, your same religious beliefs, your background. If you are a widower or a widow, they will sort of match that story and give you some sort of a way to bond with them. And they will be elaborate, and they will invest a significant amount of time learning about you, gaining your trust before they ask for the big payday. So in the end, Bob didn't get his money back. It was kind of long gone at that time. There was no way to trace it by a lot of the reports. But the craziest part about this story was at the end, Bob felt he needed to confront this person he'd been talking to that was the scammer. And the scammer admitted it. But then the scammer said, but I'm being forced to do this. I'm being, trafficked by the cartel and I have to do this. And there's some truth to that. If you Google some stories about it, these big scam operations are run out of organized crime, sometimes often out of the United States. And they're horrifying when you really think about it. So there might have even been a kernel of truth to that. But the very last conversation they had, they said to Bob, I didn't want to hurt you. I didn't want to steal your money. I was being forced to. But if you send me another 50 grand, I can buy my freedom. And so it turned into just another way to try to get more money, whether there was truth into that or not. But the way I was sort of able to break the spell with Bob was like, even if that's true, look at how much money he keeps getting from all these people. I'm sure it's not just you. Do you really think they're going to let him buy his freedom for that amount of money? Probably not. If he's a top producer, right? Probably going to keep him. If they're forcing him to do this, they're probably going to keep him. So long story short, I think the point that I was trying to make is that it can start from something very innocent and it can build over time. And so I want to start with kind of those innocent red flags. What are the things to look for early on? I'm going to show this next slide is an example of a pop-up that might show up on your device, usually a laptop or a iPad of some kind, or iPad, or not usually your phone, but usually an iPad or a desktop computer or laptop. And it's going to say, sometimes it even has audio. It'll say, stop what you're doing. Your computer has a virus. Don't click anything. Don't turn it off. Call this number. Sometimes it'll have a logo on it that actually has a reputable company like Microsoft or Norton Security or Apple. And it'll say, must call right away. And I want you to look at this for just a couple minutes and see, not a couple minutes, but a few seconds, and see if you see anything that looks suspicious to you. And then I'll show you kind of what I see. So a couple of things. It's kind of a threats detective. It kind of has some weird email address kind of up here when you see this URL. It doesn't really have a name of a company here, a reputable company. Kind of that threat detected, call right now. And then the other thing, I didn't really point the arrow in the right spot, but this number is different than, oh yes, it is the same, never mind. It meant to be different. But this one says, don't turn off your computer, contact a live technician now. Do not try to manually remove the virus. Hard disk failure may occur. Whenever there's that sort of threat, don't do anything. You're gonna break it, or you're gonna lose your money. Demands to call immediately should all be very, very suspicious. Legitimate updates for your device can be found in the settings of your device. And so I'd say, especially if you have somebody that's not that you care about, like my mom, she's not very tech savvy at all. I had to show her, like, if you ever get a pop-up like this, you don't want to click on it. You don't want to call that number. Go to the settings of your device and see if there's an update waiting. That's one of the better practices too, is to make sure you have those set for automatic updates so that you don't have to go through this. Using pop-up blockers can really help block these types of scams. And what we've seen is a resurgence of scams that start as a pop-up for tech support. Then the technician calls them, or you call the number. It sounds like a real call center. They then say, well, I'm running a scan right now. I can see somebody's hacking your computer right now. They're logging into your bank. Here, let's go look at your bank activity. Why don't you log in for me? Or I can see they're logging your bank right now. Let's get your bank on the phone. But what they conference in is a fake bank representative, but maybe they are actually given remote access to your computer so they know who you bank with. They're able to kind of get one step ahead of you and make you think you're talking to your bank. Then it sometimes morphs a third time or a second time and goes into a third scam, which can be like a government imposter scam. So goes from tech pop-up to now you think you're talking to your bank's fraud department. And then all of a sudden it turns into now you think you're talking to somebody from a government agency. You're talking to the FBI, you're talking to the Treasury Department, the FinCEN, some sort of investigator with a local government or sheriff's office that you're talking to. So sometimes when I've asked people, they'll say there's a gag order, or that they're helping with a sting operation and they think they're dealing with the FBI. When I When I uptrack all the way to where it began, it started with one of these pop-ups. Amazon, has anybody seen a fake message from Amazon? They're really good at making it look very real. And here's a couple of tips on how to recognize that. So if you see here, even though it says Amazon right here, look at it, it says at Maison, right? Like they forgot the A right there. So they can trick it by having it off by just a tiny bit. Another thing, if you're not aware, if you hover over a link like this, because you can make this say whatever you want it to say when you're creating a link. So it could say the correct URL for Amazon, like it does here. But when you hover over it, or if you copy and paste that link and paste it as a text, you will see that it doesn't actually go to this link. It goes here to this other completely different link. So you have to be really careful. And I would say anytime you get an alert via text or email that's saying, go click here, just go to how you normally find your information for that account. Always verify it at the source. So if you have an Amazon account, go to your Amazon app and look at it that way. Don't click on the link. If you have a bank account, go log on to your bank account the way you normally log on. Don't click on the link. Don't trust the phone number they give you in an email. Call the number you have on your phone or on the back of your card, or that you can look up and verify that it's them. Here's that Minnesota DMV one that I think a lot of us got. It's all summer they've been doing these. We've gotten a lot of calls on them. And here's a couple other red flags to it. It often comes from a very strange number. Sometimes it looks like it's out of the country, or it'll just say like 4 digits. And then it'll sometimes have, at first glance, it looks sort of legitimate, talking about the right department, or it'll reference something that kind of makes sense. But then if you really look at it and take the time to Google it, it says in accordance with North Minnesota. There's no North Minnesota. I mean, there is, but there's not like a city or like jurisdiction that's North Minnesota. And if you Google this administrative code, it's not a Minnesota law. And then there's a threat here, which, you must do that here, or you're going to get reported to the DMV violation database. They'll suspend your vehicle registration. They'll transfer it to a toll booth charge and charge you a 35% service fee. What does that mean? And Minnesota doesn't have toll booths. It might say you may be prosecuted and your credit score will be affected. Like, all of these are just blatant threats, and it's sort of to get you to react and to just quickly click. And then even here, though, it's got the MN-GOV, but that's still like, it makes it seem like it's kind of legitimate, but it's not a .gov. And that's what you want to look for with government addresses. It's either going to be .gov or like .state.us, .mn. That's what ours is. State.mn.us is what our email address ends at the Commerce Department in the state. So just slow down. I'd say anytime you get a demand, a threat, slow down, Google, take a breath, don't react. And it's okay to hang up on people. And when somebody's pressuring you, disconnect from it. Just say, whoops, I accidentally hung up, or send me a letter, click. I think I find that a lot, that people are too nice and they listen for too long, or they react too quickly. So the next thing I just wanted to touch on, cryptocurrency kiosks. How many of you have started noticing these pop up in places? There's more coming into grocery stores, even like the gas stations now. So one of the things that scammers have done to try to kind of get around banks, right? So banks are catching on, credit unions like Ideal are great that catch on and say, we train our employees what to look for. So when you say, I want to send, a wire to this third party, they may ask you what it is and what it's for. Or you want to send a wire to another country, they're going to ask you who it is or what it's for. And so to avoid scrutiny, the scammers came up with alternate ways to sort of break that chain, to kind of break so that no one knows where that money ends up. And one of the ways is to take out cash and to go buy other types of currency then. It could be the gold bars, it could be gift cards. And then they started opening these kiosks in these stores. So the biggest trend is, people would get cash from their bank. They would say, oh, I'm buying a boat. I'm meeting somebody, a friend of mine, I'm just going to give them cash, or I want to take out this cash for this trip. And then they go to one of these kiosks, and the scammer has given them a QR code to scan at the ATM, I guess the Bitcoin ATM or whatever brand it is. And they scan that and they say, well, this is a wallet that your cryptocurrency goes into, and it's in your name, but it's not really associated with them. It's just a wallet ID that probably the scammers control. So they go here and they set up the thing and they start feeding in the $100 bills. And so people were losing a ton of money that way. And it also breaks it so that law enforcement can't see, okay, so once the cash is taken out, they can't really see where it went after that. So what the Minnesota did in 2024 was they passed a law to try to slow down and kind of limit the losses that can happen at these ATMs. So they made these ATM providers, the people that actually own the ATMs, accountable for some of these scams, but there are some conditions. It has to be kind of reported within 14 days. And then they also imposed a transaction limit to try to limit that. So people can no longer go and deposit $30,000 at once. Like there's a limit of $2,000 per day. But if you kind of meet the requirements of the statute and you realize you've been a victim of a scam, you want to report it right away to the cryptocurrency kiosk. You want to talk to your bank, and you can call us at Commerce because we regulate these ATM providers, and we can try to help get a refund. They may be liable for not only getting you any fees back, but for all of your losses too, if it fits the requirements of the statute. So we're finding ways that we can try to fight back against some of these scams, but they often just evolve as well. So even though we put these limits in place, we're still seeing people lose a lot of money, especially in cryptocurrency scams. So let's talk briefly about personal things you can do to prevent and protect yourself and your data and your loved ones. So how many of us are guilty, and I have to raise my hand too, guilty of using passwords on more than one website? Anybody here probably, right? We all probably do it. And I'd say on certain sites that you're not keeping any sensitive data, maybe that's fine. But I want you to think of any financial account, your social security account, your investment accounts, your retirement savings. And I want you to even think of things like your cell phone provider, your internet provider. Those should also be kept really secure. And so those should all have unique passphrases. They shouldn't just be a small password anymore. They should be a long phrase or a very complex series of letters and numbers that's not easy to guess, and they should all be different. Because if you use the same one across multiple sites, and one of those sites gets compromised or that password is compromised, the scammers and the fraudsters have the way to simultaneously test that username and password across all the different platforms. And so they can get into all your stuff then as soon as you do that. And when I mentioned your cell phone website, so let's say you have a cell phone with, provider ABC cell phone company. If they're able to get into that, if you've ever switched cell phone companies, you know that they can port that number. So they can steal your number out from under you if they can get into your account. You basically go in and create a PIN because you're going to transfer. You call the new company and say, if they have all your information, they can pretend to be you and then say, I'm transferring that phone. And in the time frame when you're reeling and trying to figure this out, they now can get those one-time passcodes if they're getting into your accounts. And we've seen that happen many times where the scammers actually had the cell phone number and intercepted those one-time passcodes because they ported out the victim's phone number without them realizing it. So keep your cell phone account very secure, keep your internet and your Wi-Fi secure, and then keep all of your financial accounts as well. Keep your software up to date on devices. And that's kind of what those pop-ups go. Use pop-up blockers, learn about your devices, take a class if you're not familiar. When you go buy those products, ask for support tips. And what I'd say is if you don't do those automatic updates, the hackers, once those updates are released, they reverse engineer it and they now know where the weakness is, right? So if you don't update right away, your device is now more susceptible to hackers because they already know, they've identified that security breach or that patch that what the update was fixing. So make sure you turn it on auto updates or you are being timely with installing those. And when I mentioned earlier, those one-time passcodes that get sent to your phone when you're trying to log into account, be really careful of that too. We also know that scammers are really good at, again, saying they're your bank. I'm just going to send you this one-time passcode to verify your identity. If you did not initiate that call, be very cautious and read that text message and what it says. And oftentimes it'll say, do not share with anyone. And if it says that, hang up and just start over. Go into your bank, call yourself and figure out what's going on. But if it says something like don't share or this is your login for your website, be really cautious because I think that's usually somebody's trying to get into your account. And then I'd say again, if somebody is saying, I want to just take a look at your computer, I can help you fix this. And they say, click on this link so I can see. Don't do that. don't, unless you are paying a reputable tech company, you don't ever give somebody over the phone access to your computer, because they can not only just see what you're seeing, but they can install software that then allows them to continue to see what you're doing, whether you have the computer open or not, or whether you're active on the internet or not. And then have that skeptical mindset. Always double check and verify. It's okay to hang up on people. It's okay to pause. Especially whenever there's something in your gut that says this doesn't feel right, just go, oops, I guess I have to go, right? And just do some research, take a breath from it. That they're counting on you to keep them on the phone or to keep them engaged, and so that they can keep you in that heightened state and get you to act. So what do you do if you suspect a scam? I always talk about that: pause, verify, and report and protect. And so, pause, it's okay to hang up, go to the source, go into your bank, log into your app the way you normally do, call a friend or family member, especially with those friend scams or the family member scams. They'll say, don't call mom and dad, I'll get in trouble. Call mom and dad, or call the person that you think is in trouble. And then consult a professional. Go to your bank, go to the tellers. They know, they see this stuff, they want to help. There's also good fraud hotlines, and I've got a page of resources at the end of this presentation of free national hotlines that you can call if you suspect a fraud or scam. And then even when it's an attempt, even if you don't send any money, start reporting it. I think it's really, really helpful for you to not only report it to the authorities, but to share that experience with your friends and family, your loved ones. I think the more I've seen people do that, hey, everybody watch out for this. I almost fell for this scam. The more you see that, the more that can keep people aware. And I always tell people it's not a one-time conversation. With my mom, I don't just tell her once. I talk to her every week. I probably talk to her about fraud and scams, and she knows this is what I do for a living. But also, I want to keep it at top of her mind that don't trust people that are calling you. Don't answer calls that you don't recognize. The other thing I'd say is if you do lose money in a scam, or you're kind of almost victimized by one of these professional criminals, it's really easy to place the blame on yourself. And I want you to really remember, especially if you're dealing with a loved one who's been involved in a scam, it's not their fault. This is a crime. And if if their car was stolen, you wouldn't go out and say, why did you let somebody steal your car? It's just the car was stolen. And so I think the biggest thing to remember when you're dealing with this types of things, we don't know what they went through. They could have thought it was life or death. They could have had this great connection with this person for months. And it's hard for us to, because sometimes you can look at it objectively, or, from the outside and say that's very so easily recognizable as a scam, but we don't know what led up to that. And it could have been months of grooming before that happened. Couple of things I just wanted to point out that I haven't already. There's a new technique or sort of trend that scammers are doing. After you sort of catch on and you confront them about the scam, I know you're scamming me, or you just stop picking up, and you've now cut off contact with them. They now will shift gears and they will pretend to be law enforcement or a law firm that says they can get your money back, right? So now you've lost money in this scam, you're feeling down, you're isolating yourself, you're embarrassed, you're ashamed. Now they're going to call you and say, hey, I'm so-and-so from the FBI. I'm investigating this. We want your help to catch these criminals. Boom, you're in. But it's not the FBI, it's still the scammers. And what they're trying to do is get you to give them more bank information. They might say they want you to do a transaction to help catch the criminals, or to secure your assets in a government or treasury backed account. And so be really cautious if law enforcement is contacting you, and make sure it's them. Ask to meet in person if you can. And if they ever start asking you for that type of information, bank information, I've heard it from every law enforcement official that I've talked to. They will never ask you to do a transaction to catch a criminal. They would never have you put up your own money as a sting operation. That's not how it works. So anyway, I wanted to throw that out there, make sure I prepare people for it. So when I'm talking to victims who are trying to cut off contact, I tell them they're going to keep targeting you, and they're going to get really creative, and they might get really aggressive about it as well. All right, so be kind to yourself, talk to someone, don't isolate yourself. That's kind of, again, what they count on, and they'll keep trying to reach you. So one of the other things you can do is call us. So here at the Department of Commerce, we do oversight of over 40 industries. And then my little team, a small group of us, help with fraud, in particular targeting seniors and vulnerable Minnesotans. So if you do have a concern about fraud or exploitation targeting someone 65 or older, or someone who might be vulnerable, which means they might need help with services, they may have a disability, or they may need help with daily living activities, or have some sort of impairment, my team can help. And we work with financial institutions. We work with the victims themselves and their support people. We work with adult protective services and law enforcement, and we can help protect assets. So when there's active scams going on, when there's a really high risk of money disappearing imminently, we can work with the bank to temporarily place a hold and try to get some intervention there and get some support and help for the victim. So we have some expertise and some specifics around how to do that. And then I help with the consumers. The consumers always have a right to appeal and talk to me and talk to our department and figure out how we move forward. When we get a report of financial exploitation, we do investigate to assess the level of risk, and we'll contact the alleged victim, the reporter, and third parties that are authorized to talk to us about that case. And if there's intervention needed, we will take those steps. We may discuss it with the financial institutions or discuss a potential hold or ask them to monitor the accounts and let us know if they continue to see the behavior or the pattern. And we may also get law enforcement or social services involved as well. And then one of the biggest components of our job is providing education and resources. And we do it proactively, like in events like this, where we're reaching out ahead of time, and we'll do it as a reaction to somebody who has been targeted by scammers. We have a specific page on our website, on the Commerce website. We also have a phone number you can call and an email address. There is also a separate line to get social services involved if you're ever concerned about health, safety, financial elder abuse. You can call the Minnesota Adult Abuse Reporting Center, and they have a one-size hotline that you can call, and that dispatches to the local county adult protection unit. And I talked about national resources that we have available. These are, whether you're a senior or not, you can still use these resources. Both AARP and the National Elder Fraud Hotline are fantastic. They usually will listen and go through red flags, take time to talk to you about it and educate you, again, without judgment, with that empathy-centered approach. The National Elder Fraud Hotline right now is, I think it is shut down because of the government shutdown right now, but they're great when they're normally up and running. The AARP Fraud Watch Network has amazing videos and education resources online. And if you're, again, dealing with a situation where you're caring about a loved one and you're not sure how to talk to them, they have an amazing entire section on their website called Words Matter. And it's about how to have these tough conversations, how to, again, empower somebody who's being targeted rather than shaming them. And it's all about the words that we use. You can report fraud to either your local police office. I would say anything done through the banking system, for sure, report to the FBI, which is done through ic3.gov. So this is the FBI's online crime, Internet Crime Complaint Center is what it stands for. And so it's ic3.gov. And that has an asset recovery team. So especially if you send a wire, like through the banking system, and you figure it out right away, sometimes they can get your money back. So the FBI is one of the best places to report it. If there's a local component, like the guy who handed off gold bars in a Perkins parking lot, local police. We want to make sure to file a local police report for that. If somebody knows where you live, if you're meeting somebody in person, if you're going to an ATM, you'll want to talk to the local police as well. And then the Federal Trade Commission, you can also file reports of fraud as well and identity theft. So I think that's pretty much what I wanted to focus on. What questions do you guys have? Or if anyone wants to share an example of either cybersecurity or scam type thing, happy to listen. Let me see here. Yeah, I don't see any questions. Geneva, do you have any?
No, everything that you've provided is just amazing, and it gives hope that, there's people that will help us and organizations we're all in this together to help stop this fraud. So really appreciate it. It
Yeah,
looks
and
like there's one question.
I did see that. Someone asked, are older computers more vulnerable to being hacked than newer ones? And it's not necessarily the computer itself if you're getting the software up to date, so your operating system. And so I would recommend, if you haven't had a professional look at it in a long time, if it is an old computer, it might be worth paying a couple $100, taking it to a professional like Geek Squad or another internet provider. I don't want to name a specific company, we're not endorsing them, but a reputable one, to get that operating system up to date. Because if that's not current, that's where they have those vulnerabilities where hackers could potentially get in. They will also scan for malware. You can ask them to do things like block your pop-ups, help you understand your computer a little bit better about what to look for. It's not a bad idea. There are sometimes community ed classes that can do that kind of stuff for free as well. But I would say it's more about keeping those software updates up to date than the device itself. Because I have a really old iPhone, but I make sure every update that comes out, it goes in right away. Good question, though. Any other ones? Well, if you do think of, I think that was it. Okay. If you do think of anything, you certainly can reach out to me as well. Again, through our seniorfraud.com at state.mn.us email address. You can give us a call on our consumer hotline. And certainly I'm on LinkedIn if you want to connect there as well. But I really appreciate your time today. I hope you learned something a little bit about what we do here at Commerce, how we can help, and a little bit about how they're using, cyber crime to sort of really target seniors in particular, but everybody this time of year. So thank you very much for joining, and thanks for having me, Geneva.
Yes, absolutely. We really appreciate you being here for us too. Um, So everyone, we hope the session gave you valuable insights into protecting yourself and your loved ones from financial fraud. Yes, and a big thank you to, Tara Ambrose for sharing her expertise and practical tips. Remember, staying informed is the first step to staying secure. If you have additional questions or need resources, please reach out to Ideal Credit Union or visit the Minnesota Department of Commerce with all the reference that Tara gave us. Um, Also, please note that the webinar has been recorded and it will be available as a reference on our Ideal CU website. Maybe you'll want to share with a friend or family member. Very interesting information and stories that we can all possibly relate to or know someone that went through one of these situations. So thank you everyone for joining, and we hope you have a great evening and stay safe online.